You spent decades doing the right things. You showed up, you worked hard, you made sacrifices that most people around you never fully understood, and you built something real. Whether your retirement account is modest or substantial, whether you own your home outright or are still working toward that freedom, the fact that you're watching this video right now means you are the kind of person who takes their financial future seriously. That is not something everyone does, and it is not something that happens by accident. There is a particular kind of dignity that comes with reaching this stage of life with your finances intact. You may have helped your children through college, navigated market downturns without panicking, and outlasted coworkers who burned out or gave up. The years between 60 and 75 represent something rare in modern American life, accumulated financial wisdom combined with actual assets to protect. You have arrived somewhere that millions of people never reach. But here is what almost no one is going to tell you, and it is the reason this video exists. The greatest financial threats you face right now are not coming from market crashes, inflation, or the decisions of strangers. They are being created in ordinary conversations you are already having, in familiar settings with people you genuinely trust, in moments that feel completely natural and even generous. The vulnerability is not in your portfolio. The vulnerability is in what you say. Over the next 40 minutes, we are going to walk through 5 specific categories of information that, once shared, change the financial behavior of people around you in ways that most of them are not even aware of. We are not talking about obvious mistakes. We are talking about the kind of conversation you had last week, or last month, or at dinner 3 days ago. By the time this video ends, you will have a protection framework that most Americans with significant assets never develop, and your retirement will be measurably safer for it. Before we go any further, a quick word for the people who found this video through a search and are not yet subscribed to this channel. Research consistently shows that viewers who are not subscribed miss between 60 and 70% of the videos a channel publishes, simply because the algorithm does not prioritize showing them new content. On a channel like this one, where each video addresses a specific and consequential financial decision you may be facing in the next 6 to 12 months, that gap matters. Hit the subscribe button now, turn on notifications, and make sure you do not miss the videos that are most relevant to where you are in your retirement journey. It takes 4 seconds, and it means you will have the information you need before you need it, not after. Part 1, the psychological framework. There's a reason that financial exploitation of people over 60 has reached levels that shock even seasoned researchers. According to the AARP Public Policy Institute's landmark 2023 analysis, Americans over the age of 60 lose $28.3 billion every single year to financial exploitation. That number is staggering on its own, but what makes it genuinely alarming is the breakdown. $20.3 billion of those dollars, more than 72% of the total, are taken not by criminals or strangers, but by people the victims already know. Friends, family members, caregivers, people who were trusted with information before the exploitation began. The question that most people never stop to ask is, how did those people learn what they needed to know? The answer, in the overwhelming majority of cases, is that the victim told them, not carelessly, not naively, but through the completely normal, socially reasonable process of sharing your life with people who matter to you. Understanding why this happens with such regularity in retirement requires understanding 3 psychological forces that are specific to this stage of life. These forces do not make you weak or foolish. They make you human. But they also make you more financially transparent than you have been at any previous point in your adult life. And that transparency has a cost that you can no longer afford to ignore. The first force is what psychologists call the identity reconstruction effect. When you were working, your professional identity provided a clear, stable answer to the question of who you are. Your title, your employer, your income level, your expertise, these formed a coherent structure that organized how you presented yourself to the world. Research published in the journal Psychology and Psychiatry in 2024, authored by Dr. L.P. Chen, documents what happens when that structure disappears. Individuals experience a post-retirement identity crisis in which they struggle to redefine their sense of self once professional roles are no longer central to their lives. This transition creates what the research calls an emotional and psychological void. To fill that void, many retirees unconsciously reach for the one identity marker that remains concrete and measurable: their financial position. When someone asks how retirement is going, the temptation to answer in financial terms is not vanity. It is a search for solid ground. Saying, we have saved enough to be comfortable, or the portfolio has done well, or the house is worth 3 times what we paid, is a way of saying, I am still someone of substance, someone who succeeded, someone who did not fail. What protects you is recognizing this impulse for what it is, a psychological need masquerading as a simple conversation. That recognition is the first layer of protection, and we will build on it throughout this video. The second force is what research identifies as the trust acceleration that comes with retirement's narrowed social world. Dr. Laura Carstensen of the Stanford Center on Longevity has spent decades documenting what she calls socio-emotional selectivity theory. As people age, they naturally narrow their social circles and invest more deeply in a smaller number of relationships. The result is a concentration of emotional trust. You feel more open, more comfortable, more genuine with the people who remain in your life than you did during the decades when you were managing hundreds of professional relationships simultaneously. The University of Michigan National Poll on Healthy Aging, published in January 2025 in the Journal of the American Medical Association, found that 33% of adults between 50 and 80 reported feeling lonely with some frequency in 2024. For those living alone, that number rises to 47%. Loneliness and trust acceleration together create a powerful combination, a reduced social world where each remaining relationship feels more precious, more central, and more worthy of full honesty. That honesty is a virtue in almost every dimension of human connection. In the dimension of financial information, it is a specific and measurable risk. The third force is what behavioral economists call the completion narrative drive. After a lifetime of building, accumulating, and working toward goals, retirement represents arrival. You made it. And arrival creates a deeply human desire to tell the story of how you got there, to account for the choices, the sacrifices, and the results. This is not bragging. This is the natural human need to have your journey witnessed and understood by the people you love. A 2017 Merrill Lynch and AgeWave study on retirement finances found that half of pre-retirees consider financial topics too taboo to discuss openly. And yet, those same individuals regularly share specific financial details with family members in informal settings. The formal taboo and the informal disclosure coexist because the completion narrative drive operates below the level of conscious choice. You're not deciding to tell people how much you have saved. You are telling the story of your life, and the financial details are simply part of the story. What protects you is learning to tell that story with the meaningful parts intact and the specific numbers removed. And the framework for doing exactly that is what we are going to build right now. Part 2, the exposure framework. Before we name the 5 categories of financial information that create the greatest vulnerability after 60, I want to give you a concrete analytical tool that you can use for the rest of your life. Not just for the items in this video, but for any piece of financial information you are considering sharing in any context. This tool has 3 components, and I want you to remember all 3 of them, because each one catches a different category of risk. The first component is called the need to know test. Ask yourself this: does this specific person, in their specific role in my life, actually need this information to function in that role? Not want it, not benefit from knowing it, actually need it. A doctor needs to know your health conditions to treat you. A tax preparer needs to know your income. An attorney needs to know your assets to draft your estate documents. But a neighbor does not need to know your account balance to be a good neighbor. Your adult child does not need to know the exact dollar amount of your investment portfolio to have a loving relationship with you. Your hairdresser does not need to know you're thinking about moving to Florida for you to have a pleasant conversation about retirement. When you apply the need to know test and the answer is no, that is your signal to share warmth and context rather than numbers and specifics. The second component is the behavior change test. Ask yourself, if this person had this information, would it change how they behave toward me, even subtly, even unconsciously? This is not about assuming malice. Research from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's analysis of elder financial exploitation consistently shows that the people most likely to alter their behavior after receiving financial information are not strangers. They are family members, close friends, and trusted advisors. The behavior change is often not predatory. It may be as simple as a son becoming more persistent about borrowing money, or a financial professional becoming more aggressive about selling products, or a sibling quietly recalculating what they expect to inherit. The change in behavior does not require bad intent to create bad outcomes. What protects you is asking the question before you share, not after. The third component is the irreversibility test. Financial information, once shared, cannot be unshared. This sounds obvious, but its implications are rarely taken seriously. You can change your mind about a financial decision. You can move your money, update your will, or switch advisors. But you cannot reach back into another person's mind and remove the knowledge of what you told them last Thanksgiving. The CFPB and AARP data both confirm that the window between disclosure and exploitation by a known perpetrator is often months or years, which means the conversation you are having today may have consequences that do not surface until well into the future. The irreversibility test asks, am I comfortable with this person having this information permanently in whatever circumstances may arise in the next 10 to 20 years? If you cannot answer yes with confidence, the information stays with you. Let me apply this framework briefly to a simple example before we go into the 5 specific categories. Imagine you have a friend you have known for 30 years, and she asks over lunch how your investments have been doing. Need to know test. Does she need to know the specific value of your portfolio to maintain the friendship? No. Behavior change. Test. Would knowing you have $800,000 in a brokerage account change how she sees her relationship with you, asks you for help, or discusses inheritance expectations for her own family? Possibly, even if she would never consciously intend it. Irreversibility. Test. If her circumstances change, a divorce, a financial crisis, a new romantic partner, are you comfortable with her permanently possessing that information? Apply the framework, and the answer becomes clear. Share your enthusiasm about how things are going without sharing the number. With that framework in place, let us now look at the 5 specific things you should stop sharing today. Part 3A, Thing 1, how much money you have saved or invested. Layer 1, the innocent moment. It almost always starts with a question that is genuinely meant with warmth. A sibling calls to catch up and asks, "So are you doing okay financially? Do you have enough put away?" A neighbor who has known you for 15 years sits down at your kitchen table and says, "Between you and me, are you comfortable?" An adult child, worried about your future security, asks directly, "Dad, can you tell me roughly what you have saved, just so I know you're going to be all right?" These are not hostile questions. In most cases, they come from people who genuinely care about you. The moment feels intimate and safe. It feels like exactly the kind of honest conversation that close relationships are supposed to make possible. And so you tell them, not to impress, not to brag, but because the question feels like it comes from love, and because the number feels like evidence that you are okay, that your life's work was not in vain, that there is nothing to worry about. You might say something like, "We have about 400,000 in the IRA and another 150 in the brokerage." Or, "Between the pension and the savings, we are in pretty good shape. Somewhere around 600,000 all told." You say it the way you would say any other factual thing about your life. Casually, honestly, and without any awareness that the moment has changed something. Layer 2, the statistical reality. According to the 2023 AARP Public Policy Institute analysis by Jelena Gunther, Americans over 60 lose $28.3 billion annually to financial exploitation, and the single largest category of perpetrators, responsible for $20.3 billion of that total, is people the victim knows personally. In 72% of documented cases, the person who ultimately accessed or redirected the victim's funds had prior knowledge of the approximate size of those funds. That knowledge did not typically come from a database or a hack. It came from a conversation. Separately, a Merrill Lynch and Age Wave study found that 79% of American parents provide financial support to adult children, with total annual flows exceeding $500 billion, twice what those same parents invest in their own retirement accounts. 63% of those parents reported having sacrificed their own financial security in the process. The disclosure of a specific account balance is the single most reliable predictor of whether a family financial dynamic will shift from supportive to extractive, because it replaces vague optimism with a concrete target. Layer 3, the specific damage mechanism. Here is exactly what happens when someone learns the specific number. The knowledge does not sit passively in their mind. It becomes a reference point that reshapes their expectations, their calculations, and eventually their requests. A son who believed his parents were comfortable may feel no urgency to be financially independent. A son who knows his parents have $450,000 in a brokerage account begins, unconsciously in many cases, to calculate what a $10,000 loan would represent as a percentage of that total, and to reason that a small ask is reasonable given the context. That cognitive shift is not malice. It is human math. But its financial consequences for you are the same whether it comes from love or from greed. The CFPB's analysis of suspicious activity reports found that among cases of financial exploitation by known perpetrators, the average individual loss was $34,200. That is not a rounding error in most retirees' accounts. For someone with $400,000 saved, that represents more than 8% of their total retirement assets, gone in a single exploitation event that likely began with a disclosure conversation. And these events almost never announce themselves in advance. They arrive as requests, opportunities, emergencies, or gradual pressure that unfolds over months. There is a third-order consequence that is less discussed but equally damaging. The disclosure of your net worth changes how you are positioned in family financial conversations going forward. You become, in the minds of those who know, the person with resources. Requests that might have been directed outward, toward a bank, a government program, a neighbor, are now directed inward, toward you. Over a retirement that may span 25 to 30 years, The cumulative financial drag of being the known resource in your family network can be measured in 6 figures. Layer 4, the psychological trap. The mechanism that keeps this pattern going is what psychologists call reciprocal disclosure pressure. When someone shares something vulnerable with you, their fears about your security, their own financial struggles, their trust in the intimacy of the moment, you feel a powerful social obligation to respond in kind. Withholding specific information in that moment can feel like a betrayal of the intimacy being offered. It can feel cold, secretive, or as if you do not trust the person asking. The trap is that what feels like generosity in the moment, the sharing of a number, is actually the transfer of a vulnerability, and you cannot retrieve it once it has been given. Layer 5, the protective alternative. What protects you is replacing the specific number with a confident, emotionally satisfying answer that gives the person what they actually need: reassurance. When someone you care about asks if you are financially secure, what they need to hear is that you are okay, not the exact balance in your IRA. The response that works is something like this: "We have been fortunate and we have planned carefully. We are in a position where we do not need to worry about the basics. If that ever changed, you would be one of the first people I would tell." That answer is warm, honest, and complete. It gives the person reassurance, it honors the intimacy of the question, and it shares nothing that can be used against you. If a family member presses for specifics, the protective response is equally clear. "I appreciate you caring, and I want you to know we are in good shape. But I have learned that specific financial numbers are better kept private, even within families. It is just a habit I have adopted, and I hope you understand." Most people will not press further, and the ones who do are giving you important information about the nature of their interest. Part 3b, Thing 2, that you are thinking of selling your home or moving. Layer 1, the innocent moment. The conversation almost always begins in the most natural setting imaginable. You are at a church social, or sitting on the back porch with your next-door neighbor, or having lunch with an old colleague, and the subject of housing comes up the way it always does, casually, contextually, without any sense of consequence. You mention that the house feels a little large now that the kids are gone, or you say that you have been thinking about moving somewhere warmer, or you tell a close friend, "Between you and me, we have started talking seriously about selling, probably within the next year." You might even mention the neighborhood you're considering, the price range you have been researching, or the fact that you have not called a realtor yet because you are still deciding. It feels like ordinary life conversation. It is the kind of thing you naturally share with people who know you, because they share their lives with you too. The idea that this particular disclosure could be financially dangerous seems almost paranoid. You're not sharing account numbers. You're simply mentioning that you might move. How could that possibly cause harm? Layer 2, the statistical reality. According to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, almost 1,500 Americans ages 60 and older lost $65 million to real estate exploitation in 2023 alone, an increase of 14% in complaints from the previous year, as cited in a joint brief from the National Association of Realtors, AARP, and the American Land Title Association in June 2024. The FTC's historical data shows that in 2018, older adults were 496% more likely than younger consumers to report a financial loss related to real estate fraud. That is not a rounding error. That is a targeting pattern. What makes older homeowners a specific target is not simply that they own property. It is that their equity is known, their timeline is often public, and their decision-making process is frequently discussed in social settings before any professional transaction has begun. Predatory buyers, unscrupulous investors, and exploitation networks actively monitor for signals that an older homeowner is considering a sale, and those signals are most reliably provided by the homeowner themselves in ordinary social conversation. Layer 3, the specific damage mechanism. The damage mechanism works in 2 distinct ways. The first is direct predatory solicitation. When it becomes known in your social network that you are considering selling, that information travels with remarkable speed. An adult child mentions it to a friend. A neighbor mentions it to someone at their gym. Someone hears it at church and tells someone who knows someone in real estate. Within weeks, you may begin receiving unsolicited offers from buyers who present themselves as doing you a favor, offering a fast, no-hassle sale, sometimes with a pre-qualified buyer already lined up. These offers are almost always below market value, sometimes dramatically so. The FICO Financial Research Group documents predatory buyer tactics in which older homeowners are pressured to sell for tens of thousands of dollars below what open market competition would produce. The second damage mechanism is subtler and more common. When family members or close friends know you are planning to sell, their calculations about your financial future change. The equity in your home, which may represent $200,000, $300,000 or more in a home you have owned for decades, becomes in their minds a soon-to-be liquid asset. Loan requests, gift expectations, and investment opportunities tend to cluster around the period between when a sale becomes known and when the proceeds are actually distributed. The window between disclosure and closing is the highest risk period in residential real estate for older sellers, and that window is opened by the conversation you have before you ever call an agent. Layer 4, the psychological trap. The mechanism at work here is called anticipatory sharing, and it is deeply embedded in how human beings navigate major life transitions. When you are considering a significant change, talking through that change with people you trust is how you process the decision. It feels healthy, and in most domains, it is. The trap is specific to financial decisions. The very people with whom you process the decision are often the same people whose behavior will change when they have the information. The act of processing the decision publicly creates the exposure before the decision is even made, which means you cannot easily walk it back even if you later decide not to sell. Layer 5, the protective alternative. What protects you is a clear internal rule. No one outside of your attorney, your financial advisor, and the realtor you have actively chosen learns about a potential home sale until you have a signed listing agreement and a professional team protecting the transaction. Before that point, the response to any housing-related question is warm but non-committal. We are always thinking about what the next chapter looks like. Nothing is decided yet. That response is honest, closes no doors, and gives no one a timeline or a target. Once the sale is underway with professional representation, the information becomes less sensitive because the transaction is protected by process. Until then, it stays private. Part 3C. Thing 3. The exact structure of your estate. Who gets what when you die? Layer 1. The innocent moment. It usually starts from the best possible impulse. You want your family to be prepared. You want to avoid the confusion and conflict that you may have witnessed when other people's parents died without clear plans. You sit down with your children and explain that you have a will, that you have named a trustee, that you have decided to divide things a certain way. Or you mention at a family dinner that you have recently updated your estate documents, and you walk through the broad strokes. Or you share, perhaps privately with one child, that you intend to leave a larger portion to one sibling than another because of different financial circumstances. These feel like acts of responsible parenting. They feel like love in the form of clarity. They feel like exactly the kind of adult conversation that mature families have. There is nothing wrong with the impulse. There is something deeply worth examining about the timing and the specificity. Layer 2, the statistical reality. Research by the University of Wyoming's Dr. Virginia Vincenti and Dr. Bernard Steinman, published in 2020, found that entitlement expectations, exchange expectations, fairness conflict, and communication patterns are all statistically associated with the occurrence of elder family financial exploitation. Separately, a 2026 study by Empathy, conducted in partnership with Census-Wide, found that only 28% of families expect a smooth wealth transfer process, while 53% anticipate problems including delays, conflict, and unintended outcomes. Between July 2023 and June 2024, the United States Department of Justice uncovered more than 300 cases of elder financial abuse, involving more than 700 defendants, who collectively stole nearly $700 million from more than 225,000 older victims. The majority of those cases involved perpetrators with prior knowledge of the victim's estate structure. Layer 3, the specific damage mechanism. The specific damage mechanism of premature estate disclosure operates across 3 channels. The first is behavioral modification by anticipated beneficiaries. When a child or a family member learns, they are set to receive a specific amount, say $300,000 in a brokerage account. That knowledge alters their financial behavior in the present. Decisions about their own savings, their spending, and their requests to you are made against the backdrop of an expected inheritance. This is not hypothetical. It is documented in behavioral finance research on what is called the anticipatory consumption effect. The result for you is that you become more likely to face financial pressure in your final decade of life from people who are, in part, pre-spending an inheritance they have already been told about. The second channel is unequal disclosure, creating family conflict during your lifetime. If you tell one child about the estate structure and not another, or if children compare notes and discover discrepancies between what they were told, the conflict that follows is not a future problem, it is a present one. University of Maine Center on Aging research published in 2023 documented that a lack of transparency around power of attorney arrangements is one of the top 3 risk factors for elder family financial exploitation. The same principle applies to estate disclosure. Partial or inconsistent information creates the conditions for resentment, pressure, and eventual exploitation long before death. The third channel is the most direct. Once someone knows the specific structure of your estate, they know exactly what financial position you are in, who has authority over your assets, and twice, in the case of power of attorney arrangements, who controls access while you are still living. The University of Wyoming research specifically identified power of attorney exploitation by family members as a high-risk category, with relatives identified as the largest group of perpetrators who misuse that authority. Estate information does not need to reach a stranger to become dangerous. It needs only to reach someone whose financial circumstances may change over the next 10 to 20 years. Layer 4, the psychological trap. The trap here is what we can call the transparency virtue trap. American culture places enormous positive value on openness, especially within families. Sharing your estate plans feels like the responsible, loving thing to do. It feels like the opposite of the secrecy and silence that led to conflict in other families you have observed. The virtue of transparency is real in many dimensions of family life. In the dimension of estate planning, premature and specific disclosure is not a virtue. It is a risk that will compound over the years remaining before the estate is actually settled. Layer 5, the protective alternative. What protects you is a two-part strategy. First, ensure your estate documents are complete, properly executed, and held by your attorney, not discussed at dinner. Second, when family members ask about your plans, the protective response is honest but appropriately bounded. I have worked with an attorney to make sure everything is in order, and I'm confident the plan is fair and well considered. When the time comes, everyone will understand my thinking. For now, I'm keeping the specific arrangements private because I have learned that is simply the wiser approach. You can add, what I can tell you is that I love you and I have taken your interests into account. That statement is meaningful, complete, and gives away nothing that creates financial risk. Part 3D. Thing 4. That you're unhappy with your financial advisor, bank, or current financial plan. Layer 1. The innocent moment. It happens in the most ordinary of circumstances. You are having coffee with a friend, and the subject of your financial advisor comes up. You mention, without thinking much of it, that you have been frustrated with the service you have been getting, that calls do not get returned promptly, that you feel like just a number, that you're not sure the fees you're paying are justified by what you receive. Or you mention to an adult child that you're thinking about moving your account somewhere else. Or you tell a neighbor that you are unhappy with your bank's interest rates and you're considering making a change. These feel like minor complaints. They feel like the kind of thing adults talk about. There is no obvious reason why sharing this kind of dissatisfaction would carry financial risk. What you have actually done in each of these cases is broadcast that you have a significant sum of money in motion and that you are emotionally and structurally vulnerable to a better offer. Layer 2, the statistical reality. The FTC's most recent annual report on protecting older consumers, published in December 2025, found that older adults in 2024 reported losing far more money to investment exploitation than to any other fraud type. Combined losses reported by older adults who lost more than $100,000 increased eightfold, from $55 million in 2020 to $445 million in 2024. Total reported losses from adults 60 and older grew from approximately $122 million in 2020 to approximately $700 million in 2024. A 474% increase in just 4 years. The FTC specifically documented that investment exploitation increasingly reaches victims through social referrals, recommendations from people who learned of a vulnerability through conversation, not cold outreach. Layer 3, the specific damage mechanism. The mechanism works through a network effect that most people underestimate. When you tell a friend or family member that you are unhappy with your current advisor, that information travels. Your friend mentions it to their brother-in-law, who happens to work at a financial services company. Your adult child mentions it to a colleague who knows someone who sells annuities. A neighbor who heard your complaint at a block party introduces you to someone at her church who does really well with retirement accounts. None of these referrals are necessarily predatory in origin, but the combination of your known dissatisfaction, your known approximate wealth, which may have been shared in earlier conversations, and your known openness to change creates the precise conditions that financial exploitation networks and legitimate but aggressive salespeople actively look for. The damage in this category tends to be product-driven, an unsuitable annuity, an unnecessarily complex investment structure, or an account transfer that generates significant fees without improving your actual financial outcomes. The CFPB has documented how transitions between financial institutions are among the highest risk moments for inappropriate product placement, particularly for clients who arrive already frustrated and therefore more susceptible to a pitch that promises a better experience. A retiree who moves $300,000 in rollover assets to a new institution following a period of publicized dissatisfaction is statistically more likely to be placed in a high-commission product than one who makes the same move quietly and deliberately. There is a second damage channel that is less obvious but equally consequential: your current advisor or institution. When a financial professional knows you are unhappy and considering leaving, their incentive structure changes. Retention often comes in the form of rushing product sales, accelerating decisions you had planned to make more slowly, or creating dependency through complexity. The knowledge of your dissatisfaction is a lever that works in both directions, attracting new pitches and altering the behavior of those who currently hold your assets. Layer 4, the psychological trap. The mechanism here is complaint as connection. Sharing frustrations about service providers is one of the most common forms of social bonding in American adult conversation. It is relatable, it generates empathy, and it invites reciprocal sharing from others. The trap is that in this specific category, financial provider dissatisfaction, what feels like ordinary venting is actually a signal flare to anyone in your network who has any interest in financial products or services. You do not need to be in a room full of bad actors for this signal to reach them. You need only to mention it once in a social setting where the information can travel. Layer 5, the protective alternative. What protects you is a clean separation between your social conversations and your professional transitions. If you are unhappy with your current financial arrangement, the path forward runs through a fee-only fiduciary advisor or trusted estate attorney, not through social complaints. The response to any social question about your financial provider is simple and final. Things are fine on that front. If you are actively making a change, you make it quietly, with professional guidance, and you tell no one until the transition is complete. The protective script for pressing questions is equally direct. I keep my financial arrangements pretty private, even with people I trust. I hope you understand. Part 3E, Thing 5. That you're financially or emotionally alone in managing your money. Layer 1, the innocent moment. This one arrives in some of the most vulnerable moments of ordinary life. Now, you mentioned to a friend that since your spouse passed, you have been handling all the finances yourself, and it has been overwhelming. Or you tell a family member that you do not really have anyone to talk to about financial decisions, that your advisor seems more interested in selling than advising. Or you say, perhaps at a support group or a senior center, that you feel isolated and uncertain about the big financial choices coming up, and that you wish you had someone to help you think things through. You are being honest. You are reaching out appropriately for connection and support. There is nothing shameful about that. But you have also just broadcast the single most actionable vulnerability a financial predator can act on. You are alone, you're uncertain, and you're open to being helped. Layer 2, the statistical reality. The AARP Public Policy Institute's 2023 analysis found that of the $28.3 billion lost annually to financial exploitation of those over 60, $20.3 billion, more than 70%, was taken by known perpetrators. The University of Michigan National Poll on Healthy Aging found that 47% of older adults who live alone report feeling lonely with some frequency. Loneliness and financial isolation are not just emotional conditions. They are documented risk factors that financial exploitation networks specifically target. The FBI IC3 data on elder fraud consistently identifies recently widowed individuals and those without close financial confidants as the highest risk demographic within the already high-risk over 60 population. Layer 3, the specific damage mechanism. The damage mechanism here is the most direct of any item on this list. When someone learns that you are managing significant assets alone and that you lack a trusted financial confidant, they have every piece of information needed to position themselves as the solution to your problem. This positioning does not require ill intent at the outset. A well-meaning friend who offers to help you think through a financial decision may recommend a product or a person without understanding their own bias. An adult child who steps in to help a recently widowed parent may begin with genuine care and gradually develop expectations and access patterns that cross into exploitation. What the research from both AARP and the CFPB confirms repeatedly is that the person who becomes your financial helper after learning about your isolation is statistically the highest risk relationship in your financial life. The dollar figures in this category are among the highest of any exploitation type. CFPB analysis of suspicious activity reports found an average individual loss of $34,200 per exploitation event, and cases involving recently widowed individuals managing assets alone consistently exceed that average. When the exploitation is by a family member who has been granted power of attorney, a common outcome when an isolated elder seeks help managing their finances, the average losses are substantially higher, often representing the liquidation of significant retirement assets over a period of months or years. There's a third-order consequence worth naming explicitly. Once you have disclosed your financial isolation and accepted informal help from someone in your network, your legal and institutional protections weaken. Financial institutions, recognizing that you have a helper, may defer to that person's instructions. Estate documents that were drafted before the helper arrived may not reflect your current situation. The helper, however well-intentioned initially, has structural access that predates any formal legal arrangement. That access is the most difficult to challenge and the most likely to be exploited. Layer 4, the psychological trap. The mechanism here is called help-seeking vulnerability broadcasting. Human beings are wired to respond to genuine need, to step in, to offer assistance, to be useful. When you signal that you are struggling or alone, the response from your network is often genuine and warm. The trap is not in the response. It is in what the response enables. By broadcasting financial isolation, you do not attract only the people who will protect you. You attract everyone who heard you, including people whose help will cost you more than the uncertainty you are trying to resolve. Layer 5, the protective alternative. What protects you is building your financial support structure through professional channels before you need it, and keeping your social support structure separate from your financial one. The action that works is this. If you do not currently have a fee-only fiduciary financial planner, a trusted estate attorney, and at least one designated trusted contact on file with your financial institution, take care of those 3 things before you discuss your financial circumstances with anyone in your social network. These are professional relationships with legal and fiduciary obligations, the exact kind of support that provides genuine protection rather than additional exposure. When someone in your social world asks how you are managing your finances, the response that protects you is warm and complete. I have a good team in place. It took some work to put together, but I feel well supported. That answer is honest, satisfying, and shares nothing that creates risk. Part 4. What to do instead. 3 principles for information. Protection in retirement. Now that you understand the 5 specific categories of vulnerability, the question becomes, how do you build a consistent practice of financial privacy without becoming guarded, cold, or paranoid in your relationships? The answer lies in 3 principles that I want you to remember and apply every time a financial conversation begins to develop. Each principle has a specific name, a specific logic, and a specific implementation method. The first principle is called the need-to-know standard. This principle states that financial information flows only to people who require it to perform a specific, defined function in your financial life. Your accountant, your attorney, your fiduciary advisor, and your designated trusted contact at your financial institution are the people who need to know. Everyone else, including family members you love deeply, operates on a need-to-know basis, meaning they receive the information necessary to maintain a loving and supportive relationship with you, which rarely includes specific dollar amounts, account structures, or transaction plans. Implementing this standard requires you to make one private decision before every financial conversation. What role does this person play in my financial life? If the answer is none, the information stays general. If the answer is a specific professional or legal role, the information flows appropriately. This distinction is not about trust. It is about function. The second principle is called the delay and deflect protocol. This principle recognizes that financial disclosures most often happen in real time in social settings, when you have not had a chance to apply any filter. The delay and deflect protocol gives you a repeatable response for any moment when you feel pressure, social or emotional, to share financial specifics. The response has 2 parts. The delay is a short acknowledgement that does not commit to information. That is a thoughtful question. Let me think about how to answer it well. The deflect is a redirect toward the emotional content rather than the financial content. What I can tell you is that we have been careful, we have good people helping us, and I feel secure. Most people, when they ask financial questions, are looking for reassurance, not spreadsheets. The protocol gives them the reassurance without the data. The third principle addresses the most emotionally complex scenario in financial privacy, handling family members who ask directly. This principle is called the loving boundary framework. It acknowledges that within families, the demand for financial transparency is often framed as a matter of love. I just want to know you are okay, and that responding with a boundary can feel like a rejection. The framework separates the emotional content from the financial content deliberately. The response that works is built in 3 parts. First, affirm the love and the concern directly. I know you're asking because you care about me, and that means everything to me. Second, provide genuine reassurance about your security. I want you to know that I'm in a position where I am not worried, and if that changed, you would hear about it from me first. And third, name the boundary as a principle rather than a personal withholding. I have decided to keep specific financial details private, even within our family. It is a boundary I maintain with everyone, and I hope you will respect it. The third part is critical because it removes the implication that you are withholding from this particular person. The boundary belongs to you as a policy, not to them as a judgment about their character. Part 5, the family dimension in depth. Everything we have discussed in this video becomes more emotionally complex when the conversation is not with a neighbor or an acquaintance, but with a son, a daughter, a sibling, or a grandchild. Family financial conversations carry a weight that professional or social conversations do not. They involve love, history, obligation, and the deeply human desire to be fully known by the people who matter most to you. Acknowledging that complexity is not a weakness. It is the starting point for protecting yourself without damaging the relationships you have spent a lifetime building. The Merrill Lynch and Age Wave study, Family and Retirement, the Elephant in the Room, which surveyed more than 5,400 respondents, found that almost 9 in 10 Americans over 50 have provided some form of financial support to family members, and that almost none of them factored that support into their retirement planning. The study specifically identified what it called a dangerous absence of proactive boundaries in family financial conversations. The absence of a boundary is not the same as the presence of trust. It is the presence of ambiguity. And ambiguity in financial relationships is where exploitation, intentional or unintentional, takes root. Research from the University of Wyoming and the University of Maine Center on Aging consistently shows that the specific family dynamics associated with elder financial exploitation include entitlement expectations, communication patterns that lack clarity about what is and is not negotiable, and conflict about the fairness of resource distribution. None of these dynamics require a bad actor to develop. They develop naturally in families where financial expectations exist, but financial boundaries have never been articulated. The loving boundary framework from Part 4 is your primary tool in these conversations. But there is one additional script worth having ready for the moment when a family member asks you directly what you plan to leave them. When that question arises, and in many families it will, the response that works is this: I have worked with an attorney to put a plan in place that reflects my values and my love for each person in this family. I'm not going to share the specifics because I have learned that doing so creates expectations that can change relationships in ways none of us want. What I want you to know is that I have thought carefully about everyone I love, and when the time comes, the plan will make sense. Right now, what matters most to me is that we are here together. That response is not a deflection. It is a statement of genuine love that happens to contain no financially actionable information. It closes the conversation on warmth rather than on data. Part 6. What actually happens when you protect this information? There's a word that comes up whenever someone begins to practice financial privacy, and that word is paranoid. People worry that protecting their financial information makes them seem secretive, distrustful, or fearful. They worry that their family will think they have something to hide, or that their friends will think they do not trust them. I want to address this directly, because the psychology here is exactly backwards. Protecting your financial information is not an act of fear. It is an act of sovereignty. Sovereignty means that you're the author of your own financial life, that your resources exist under your stewardship, on your terms, in service of your values and your plan. Sharing specific financial details with people who do not need them does not make your relationships richer. It transfers a dimension of your autonomy into spaces you cannot control, with consequences that unfold on a timeline you cannot predict. The retiree who shares freely is not more trusting. They are more exposed. The retiree who shares deliberately is not more guarded. They are more free. Consider the difference between two retirees. The first has had open financial conversations throughout retirement. She has told her children roughly what she has saved, mentioned her plans to sell the house, walked her family through her estate thinking over dinner. She feels close to her family and prides herself on that openness. But she also finds that family financial conversations have a tension to them that was not there before. Requests come with a certainty that makes them feel more like demands. Her sense of control over her own decisions has quietly diminished. The second retiree has practiced deliberate financial privacy throughout retirement, warm and engaged with family, but specific about what information he shares and with whom. His family loves him no less. His decisions remain his. His peace of mind is not dependent on managing other people's expectations about his money. A 2017 study published in the Merrill Lynch and Age Wave Finances and Retirement series, which drew on 4 years and 50,000 respondents, found that among retirees, the single most common source of financial regret was not investment performance. It was the management of family financial expectations. Retirees who reported the highest levels of financial satisfaction were significantly more likely to describe deliberate and bounded approaches to financial disclosure within their families. The Pew Research Center's 2025 Aging Survey confirmed that among older adults who rate their financial confidence highly, a common behavioral trait is the maintenance of clear information boundaries around financial specifics. What financial privacy actually feels like, in practice, is simpler than you might expect. It feels like the absence of a particular kind of anxiety. The anxiety of wondering who knows what and what they might do with it, and whether a request you received last week was actually about love or about money. It feels like the quiet certainty that your financial life belongs to you. And after decades of building something worth protecting, that certainty is not paranoia. It is the most rational thing in the world. David retired at 65 from a career in manufacturing management in Phoenix, Arizona, with a $420,000 IRA and a fully paid home worth approximately $310,000. He was proud of what he had built and comfortable sharing his story. At a neighborhood gathering the summer after he retired, he mentioned to two close neighbors that he was sitting on a nice nest egg and that the portfolio had done well during the previous decade's bull market. He did not give a specific number, but he conveyed clearly that he was in strong financial shape. Over the following 18 months, one of those neighbors, a man he had known for 12 years, began approaching David with investment opportunities, and the first was a private real estate fund that promised 12% annual returns. David invested $45,000. The fund collapsed within 14 months. David recovered none of the investment. The neighbor had heard David's financial confidence at that backyard gathering and correctly identified him as someone with discretionary capital and insufficient skepticism toward a trusted social referral. David wishes he had answered the neighbor's question about retirement with, "We did okay," and left it at that. Story 2, Carol, 71, Boise, Idaho. Carol lived alone in Boise, Idaho, after the death of her husband of 43 years. She had $280,000 in a combined IRA and savings account and a modest pension. Her younger sister called weekly, and in one of those calls, Carol mentioned how overwhelmed she felt managing the finances on her own, that her husband had always handled the investments, and that she did not know who to trust. Her sister, with genuine concern, recommended a financial planner she had heard of through a friend of a friend. Carol met with that planner, felt reassured by his warmth and apparent knowledge, and transferred $230,000 to him over the following 3 months. The planner placed those funds in a combination of high commission annuities and variable life insurance products with surrender periods of up to 10 years. When Carol eventually sought a second opinion, a fee-only advisor estimated that the fee structure of those products would cost her approximately $62,000 over the surrender period, compared to low-cost index alternatives. She could not reverse the transactions without paying penalties equal to approximately 20% of the invested amount. Carol wishes she had told her sister, "I am working on getting the right people in place," rather than describing her isolation in detail. Story 3. Robert, 74, Charlotte, North Carolina. Robert had updated his will and trust documents the year before, and at his family's annual Thanksgiving gathering in Charlotte, North Carolina, he decided to walk his 3 adult children through the broad outline of his estate plan. He believed this would reduce conflict after his death. He explained that he was leaving a larger share to his youngest daughter, who had lower income, and a smaller share to his oldest son, who was financially established. His son received this information quietly. Over the following 2 years, the relationship between Robert and his son shifted in ways Robert found difficult to name. Less warmth, a new edge to conversations, and several large loan requests that felt less like requests than negotiations. The oldest son had calculated, to within a few $1,000s, the difference between what he expected to receive and what he now knew he would receive, and had spent 2 years trying to close that gap through other means. The family conflict that Robert had tried to prevent by being transparent arrived earlier and in a form he had not anticipated. Robert wishes he had said, "Everything is in order, and it reflects how much I love each of you," and stopped there. Story 4, Margaret, 66, Tampa, Florida. Margaret had lived in her Tampa home for 27 years. The home had appreciated significantly and carried no mortgage. She mentioned to her bridge group, 4 women she had known for more than a decade, that she was thinking of selling and downsizing now that she was fully retired. Within 3 weeks, she received 4 unsolicited calls from real estate investors offering to purchase the property off-market, below the list price she had not yet set. One offer was $38,000 below what her home ultimately sold for when she listed it through a traditional agent 4 months later. The bridge group was not the source of any malice, but one player had a son in real estate investment, another had a neighbor who bought distressed properties, and the information about Margaret's tentative plans had traveled through those connections with remarkable speed. Margaret's final sale price recovered the gap, but only because she insisted on a full market listing process despite sustained pressure for a faster, easier off-market transaction. She wishes she had said, "Nothing is decided," and waited until she had a signed agreement before telling anyone. Part 8. The 6th question. Protection filter. Before you share any piece of financial information, in any context, with anyone, run it through these 6 questions. You do not need to be obvious about it. You do not need to pause the conversation visibly. These questions take approximately 30 seconds to answer internally, and they will protect you from the vast majority of financially damaging disclosures. Question 1. Does this person have a professional role in my financial life? The logic behind this question is the foundation of the entire framework. If the answer is yes, if this person is your attorney, your fiduciary advisor, your accountant, or your designated trusted contact, then information flows appropriately. because it is being shared within a structure of professional obligation and legal accountability. If the answer is no, then you're operating under social incentives rather than professional protections, and the information should default to general rather than specific. Apply this to Thing 1, savings, and Thing 4, advisor dissatisfaction. Your hairdresser asking how the market has treated you has no professional role in your financial life, and the specific answer serves no protective function. A safe answer for any non-professional is, things are in good shape, thank you. A warning answer is any response that includes a number, an institution name, or a level of detail that goes beyond general reassurance. Question 2, will this person still be in my life in their current role 10 years from now? The logic here is the irreversibility test applied over a long time horizon. Financial information persists in people's memories long after the conversation that produced it. The person who knows your approximate net worth at 68 will still have that information at 80. Their circumstances, their finances, their relationships, their health may change dramatically in the intervening years. Apply this to Thing 3, estate structure, and Thing 2, home sale. The friend who knew you were thinking of selling in 2023 still carries that information in 2033, and the family member who knows they are set to receive a specific bequest adjusts their behavior against that expectation for the entire period between disclosure and death. A safe answer to whether you should share the information is, can I live with this person having this information under circumstances I cannot predict? A warning answer is the sense that you are making a decision about the present moment without accounting for an unknowable future. Question 3. What specific behavior change would I notice if this person had this information? This question asks you to run a mental simulation, not of the worst case, but of the realistic case. Not, would this person exploit me? But how would this person's interactions with me shift, even subtly, if they knew this? Apply it to Thing 5, financial isolation. If a family member learns you are managing your finances alone and feeling overwhelmed, would they become more likely to offer help in ways that gradually create access and dependency? Apply it to Thing 1, savings. Would a colleague who learns you have $500,000 become more likely to mention investment opportunities in passing? A safe answer is that the person's behavior toward you would be genuinely unchanged. A warning answer is the sense, even a faint one, that knowing this information would shift the dynamic. Question 4. Am I sharing this for their benefit or for mine? This question targets the completion narrative drive from Part 1, the psychological impulse to share financial information as part of the story of your life rather than in service of the other person's needs. Apply it to Thing 1 and Thing 3. When you share the size of your portfolio or the structure of your estate, are you meeting a genuine need of the listener? Or are you seeking validation, connection, or the satisfaction of being seen as someone who succeeded? Both are human impulses, and neither is shameful. But if the honest answer is that you are sharing for yourself rather than for the listener, the information can almost always be replaced with an emotional statement. I feel proud of what we built. That serves the same psychological function without creating the financial exposure. Question 5. Is this information reversible? The logic here is absolute. You can change a financial decision. You can move money, update documents, or end a professional relationship. You cannot remove information from another person's memory. Apply this to all 5 categories. Once your neighbor knows you're thinking of selling, once your son knows the estate split, once your friend knows your account balance, the knowledge is permanent. The question is not whether you trust this person today. It is whether you're willing to live with them having this information across every version of their life and yours that may exist in the coming decades. A safe answer is yes, with full confidence. A warning answer is any version of probably, but I'm not completely sure. Question 6. What is the lowest information version of what I want to communicate? This is the implementation question, the one that turns the framework into action. It asks, what is the minimum amount of financial information I need to share to achieve the genuine communicative goal of this conversation? If the goal is reassurance, the minimum information is we are okay. If the goal is preparing family members for the future, the minimum information is everything is in order. If the goal is processing a decision, the minimum information is a conversation with a professional rather than a social disclosure. Apply this to all 5 categories, and you will almost always find that the genuine communicative goal, the emotional outcome you are trying to achieve, can be reached with far less financial specificity than you were about to share. A safe answer is the version that communicates warmth and security without numbers, structures, or plans. A warning answer is the version that begins with, well, specifically. Part 9, 7-day action plan. Day 1, the financial disclosure audit. Set aside 20 minutes with a pen and paper. Write down every person, family member, friend, neighbor, acquaintance, who currently knows specific financial information about you approximate account balances, your estate structure, your plans for your home, your level of satisfaction with your financial providers, or your sense of being alone in managing your money. For each person, note how they came to have that information. This is not an exercise in regret. It is a map of your current exposure. You cannot protect what you have not identified. By the end of day 1, you will have a clear picture of where your financial information currently lives outside of professional relationships. And that clarity is the foundation for everything that follows. Day 2, the professional team assessment. On day 2, evaluate whether you currently have the 3 professional protections that every retirement age American should have in place. First, a fee-only fiduciary financial advisor, someone who is legally obligated to act in your interest and who does not earn commissions on products they recommend. Second, a trust and estate attorney who has reviewed your documents in the past 3 years and whose contact information is current. Third, a designated trusted contact on file with your primary financial institution, a person you have formally authorized to be contacted if the institution suspects you are being exploited, but who has no authority to access your funds. If any of these 3 are missing, day 2 is spent making calls. This does not require professional assistance in the sense of additional fees. It requires only that you initiate the conversations. Day 3, the response script practice. On day 3, write out by hand your personal version of the 5 protective responses from parts 3 and 4. 1 response for questions about your savings, 1 for questions about your housing plans, 1 for questions about your estate, 1 for questions about your financial providers, 1 for questions about whether you are managing a loan. These do not need to be elaborate. They need to be yours, in your voice, comfortable to say, and short enough to deliver without hesitation. Practice saying them out loud at least 3 times each. The goal is not memorization. It is the elimination of the pause that currently exists when you're asked these questions and are not sure how to answer. The pause is where disclosures happen. Day 4, the information containment review. On day 4, review any documents that might be accessible to people outside your professional team. This includes printed account statements left on desks or counters, email conversations that contain financial specifics, text messages discussing numbers or plans, and shared computer access. Now, this is a practical security review, not a paranoia exercise. The goal is to ensure that the information you're now choosing to protect verbally is also protected in physical and digital form. 25 minutes is sufficient for a complete review of common exposure points. Day 5, the family conversation. Day 5 is the most emotionally demanding day of this plan, and it is the one that matters most. Choose the family member or members with whom you are most likely to have financial conversations, and have a brief, warm conversation that establishes your new approach. You do not need to announce a policy change. The conversation can be as simple as, I have been doing some thinking about retirement finances lately, and I have decided to keep financial specifics more private going forward, even within the family. It is not about distrust. It is just a discipline I am adopting. I wanted you to hear it from me directly, so it does not seem strange if I am less specific than I used to be. Most people will receive this well. Some may push back. Either response gives you information that is useful. Day 6, the trigger recognition practice. On day 6, spend 15 minutes reviewing the 3 psychological forces from part 1. The identity reconstruction effect, the trust acceleration that comes with retirement's narrowed social world, and the completion narrative drive. For each one, identify the specific type of conversation in your own life that tends to trigger it. When do you feel the strongest urge to share financial specifics? With whom? In what settings? The goal is not to eliminate those urges. They are human, and they will continue. The goal is to recognize them in the moment, which gives you the half-second of deliberate choice that stands between a disclosure and a protected conversation. Day 7, the sovereignty commitment. On day 7, write a short personal statement, for yourself alone, not for anyone else to see, about what your financial privacy means to you and what it is protecting. It does not need to be long. It can be 2 sentences or 10. The act of writing it transforms the abstract concept of financial privacy into a personal value, something you have chosen and claimed as an expression of who you are at this stage of your life. This commitment does not require renewal. It simply requires that you have made it. Knowing that you have made it is what makes the protective responses in day 3 feel natural rather than defensive, because they are not withholding. They are expressions of a value you have consciously adopted. You built something, not just a number in an account, not just a balance on a statement, but an entire architecture of effort, judgment, restraint, and care. The people who know you and love you are not wrong to admire what you have done, and the financial security you have achieved in retirement is not simply a reward for past work. It is a living resource that needs to be protected with the same seriousness that it was created. The 5 things we discussed in this video are not obscure vulnerabilities that only affect the unlucky or the careless. They are the normal, everyday disclosure patterns of people who built something real and are proud of it, people who love their families and want to be fully known by them, people who reached a stage of life where the social circle is smaller and each relationship is more precious.